different type of challenges. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has talked to us in the Quran in a particular way about the way in which our life will undergo. For example, in chapter number 3, Surah Al-Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Tilkal ayyam nudawiluha bayna nas. Your life will undergo change. Your days will rotate. At some point, you will be top of the world. Things will be going well. At another time, you will undergo challenges. At one point, you will be rich. Something will happen in your life, you will become poor. At one point in your life, you will be healthy. Another point in your life, you will fall sick. One point in your life, you will be very beautiful. At another point in your life, that beauty will disappear. This is an entire system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you will occur in life. Therefore, all of us will undergo these challenges, irrespective of who you are. Because Allah states, Tilkal ayyam nudawiluha bayna nas. Allah will change and rotate and shift these days amongst yourselves. At one point you will be in a state of health and goodness. At another point you will undergo different challenges. By virtue of that, you can divide some of these challenges amongst various age groups and different demographics, genders, and so on and so forth. For example, if you are a youth, you will be more exposed to certain types of challenges. For example, you may be bullied, and this may cause mental health challenges. If you are a youth, you may undergo extreme pressure, such as exam pressure. It may be pressure to get married, and so on and so forth. If you are an adult and now you are married, it may be challenges around you and your family. Whether you have problems between you and your children, your in-laws, your own spouses, and so on and so forth. It may be that you undergo such things like divorce. It may be unemployment. And these are different challenges for a different age group. For example, if you are an elder, it may be that you lose your health. It may be that you lose your family members. It may be that you end up having to stay with people or in a certain type of housing that you don't want. All of these things are exposed to different types of age groups. The reality is, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, none of you can escape these challenges. They will engulf your life at some point. The reality is we understand why they come about and how to respond adequately, appropriately to these various different challenges. Now, when these challenges come, and for the sake of reflection, please, in your own life, pick one challenge that you've been through that has caused some mental health challenge to you. Death, despair of something, or it may have been an issue with employment or something. Pick one so that you can start to reflect on it as I start to go through some of these points, inshallah. Now, when one of these challenges comes to you based on your own personal life, on your own demographic, what you're going to be exposed to, we all respond in different ways. And the responses are divided into two. You can only respond in two different ways to whatever the challenges are that you will be exposed to in your life, in your demographic. Either these are genetic or these are environmental. Either you will respond based upon the predisposition that comes to you from your inheritance by virtue of the genetic makeup that you have, that will determine how you respond, or it will be the environment that you have grown up into, that you live in, that will determine your response, or of course it will be a mixture of both of these two things. So, for example, when you've responded, think for yourself how you have responded to some of the challenges that you've gone through in your life. If it's genetic, you will be predisposed to some of these genetic responses. It may be that you are predisposed to a certain type of chemical response to whatever challenge you are exposed to in your life. This means that you cannot help that type of response to the mental health challenge that you have got. It may be that your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they had a particular type of response and you inherited that type of response from them. It may have been that their type of response was never diagnosed, never treated, and therefore you inherit that response to whatever the mental health challenge you may have. The second is environmental. Based upon your socio-economic and your socio-religious upbringing, you are statistically more likely to respond to a mental health challenge in a different way. For example, if you live in a poorer socio-economic lifestyle, poorer housing, statistically you will be more likely to respond to a mental health challenge through alcohol and drugs. If, however, you are born into a more socio-religious community or family, you are more likely to respond with a response such as a response through God, a response through supplication, dua, and so on and so forth. Now that tells us the importance of having a family unit, having a community unit that is teaching a positive response to mental health challenges and to whatever type of challenges that you have as an individual, as a family unit, as a society. Often when something happens in a community, a death occurs, we often come around and help that person who's undergone that challenge within their family. But other types of issues in the community, we don't come around and help people from our own. Health, we won't help. Divorce, we won't help. What happens? The person is shunned. The person is separated from the community. You look at them differently. We might talk about them behind their back. But if someone was to pass away in your family, you would never respond in that way. But if there's a divorce in the community, or someone loses their job in the community, why do we respond differently? Why do we act like these are somehow strange things and that a human being doesn't feel the challenges of these things? This is where the stigmas have to be broken in our community, because none of these are righteous responses. All of these are immoral cultural responses as to the way in which we deal with people who go through certain mental health challenges. Therefore, the upbringing of a child in the community, in the family unit, a person who feels comfortable to deal with these things, who has a positive outlet, such as a positive religious outlet, will be able to respond differently if we have been giving them, offering them that type of support. Now, when it comes to this issue of our mental health challenges, the reason as to why we have some of these mental health challenges is, or the majority of them is based upon our chemical reaction. And what happens is that when we go through any kind of pleasure activity, our brains release a particular type of chemical which is known as dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin. So now these are different chemicals. If you go for a run, if you, go to a restaurant with your friends, if you enjoy any particular type of activity, when you do that activity, your brain releases these chemicals, and that tells you that you are enjoying that activity. You're getting satisfaction from that activity. As we stated, some of the responses that we have are chemical based. Therefore, if a person does not produce that type of chemical, or produces a lesser amount of that type of chemical, or is not engaged in that type of activity and therefore doesn't produce that type of chemical, or there is a withdrawal from that type of chemical production, that person may start to undergo what is known as depression. So this tells us that it's not their faith. We often stigmatize and say a person is going through depression, a person is going through mental health challenges, he doesn't believe properly in God. He's moving away from deen. These are two completely different issues. We are talking here that chemical reactions in the brain can determine as to whether a person falls into depression or otherwise. What we end up doing is mixing the concept of depression and despair. Despair is a faith-based issue. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran often, don't despair from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a faith-based issue. But when a person goes through depression or mental health challenges, that is not a faith-based issue. That is an issue that occurs through different chemical reactions that take place in the brain, and it is important that we don't mix those two things incorrectly. Now, number two, the third point of our discussion, how do I identify if I am going through mental health challenges, or someone in my family or someone in my community is going through mental health challenges? Our clinicians tell us that there are two types of risk factors in the identification as to whether I or someone else is going through mental health challenges. And those can be understood through core ways and biological ways. The first thing for us, according to our clinicians, is to see the grieving period that someone is going through in their mental health challenge. As we stated, think about your own mental health challenge that you've been through. Someone has passed away, God forbid, in your family. Someone has divorced, someone has lost their job, whatever it may be in your lifetimes that you've undergone with difficulty in your life. According to our clinicians, you can measure the grieving process that you've undergone or someone else is undergoing, and that will tell you as to whether they are in a state of depression or their mental health is in a state of weakness or otherwise. How long is that grieving process that you can measure? 2 to 4 weeks. If you or someone else has been grieving continuously for 2 to 4 weeks and they have not managed to change that, it is one way to identify as to someone whether they are going through a mental health challenge or not. Of course, if it's more than 4 weeks, then it's continuing to be ongoing. Now, the ways in which we can identify these risk factors are divided into two. The first are the core ways, the second are the biological ways. In terms of the core ways, you can measure whether someone is going through depression or going through a mental health challenge in the following ways. Number one, has their mood changed for 2 to 4 weeks or more? If you see someone's mood or your mood change ongoing for 2 to 4 weeks or more, then it is a sign of mental health challenges in your life. If your energy levels have gone down for 2 to 4 weeks or more, it is a sign of mental health. So for example, if you no longer want to get out of bed, if you don't want to go to work, if you don't want to go to school for 2 to 4 weeks or more, it is a sign of mental health challenge. Now I know most of us don't want to go to work, most of us don't want to go to school, but that's not what I mean by that. I mean, if you've got no energy to actually go, and you want to stay and find an excuse to stay in bed for 2 to 4 weeks, or on the couch for 2 to 4 weeks, that is a sign of mental health issues. Another core way of identifying if you have a mental health challenge is if you find no joy in the things that you normally do for 2 to 4 weeks or more. So for example, if you normally enjoy going to the gym, if you normally enjoy going to a sports game, if you normally enjoy going to a restaurant with your friends, and for 2 to 4 weeks or more, you're no longer enjoying that, it is a sign that you are in a state of depression or have a mental health issue. These are the core ways to identify. The biological responses, the biological ways for you to identify as to whether you have a mental health problem or not is the following. If you lose appetite to eat for 2 to 4 weeks or more, if you cannot sleep or you have a very bad sleep pattern, broken from your normal sleep pattern, you sleep at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 8 a.m., you're up all night watching nonsense on TV, on Netflix, this is a sign that you have slipped into a state of depression or have a mental health problem. Your routine has been broken badly for 2 to 4 weeks and you cannot break it, you cannot change it and go back to your normal routine. And your relationships change. This is a big one. If your relationship with your parents, your spouse, your children has been ruptured for 2 to 4 weeks on an ongoing basis, where there is conflict constantly between you and them, argument constantly between you and them, not for outside reasons, mental health reasons, and you can identify that that's the source, then this is another way for you to identify that you are in a state of weak or ill mental health. Fourth point and last point. How do we deal with mental health challenges? As we stated, We are not permitted to stigmatize anyone who goes through mental health challenges. We are not allowed to treat them badly, treat them in a way which would only make their situation worse, make them feel like they cannot find a source to come out of their mental health challenges. There are both the Islamic and the clinical ways in which we can recommend to deal if anyone here is going through any mental health challenges. The first is the religious, and that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He does not burden a person more than that which they can bear. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not burden you more than which you can bear. Therefore, if God forbid you are going through any trial, be it separation, be it health, be it financial, whatever it may be, Allah will not give you a challenge which is more difficult than what you can bear. You as a human being are greater than that challenge. Your God is greater than that challenge. And therefore, from the Islamic pastoral care perspective, we are recommended that we turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As He states within the Quran, indeed, you will go through difficulty. Inna ma'al usri, and then you will certainly go through difficulty. But all of that will come to an end. Surely there will be difficulty, but there will be ease after difficulty. And the way in which we are recommended is to turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or turn to any other way which helps us overcome these challenges. It may be that you have a special relationship with Al-Abbas alayhi salam. It may be that you have a special relationship with Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. It may be that you have a special relationship with Sahifa as-Sajjadiyya. Whatever it is that helps you to overcome those challenges, through God, through deen, make sure you apply those so that you stay connected to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes it may be that you will recite the dua of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In there are the words that they used whenever they underwent difficulty. Look at dua Kumail. Ya Rabbi, li'ayyi umuri ilayka ashku. Which thing in my life should I complain to you about? Ya Rabbi, anta ta'lamu dha'fi. You know my weaknesses, my Lord. Why did Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam recite these words? Was he not going through the worst of trials in the existence of history of humanity? Where did he turn to? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore you can use their words, or you can use your own words. And your own words are no lesser than the words of the dua from Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. That you can go into sajda, that you can stand by the alam, you can turn towards Karbala, you can turn towards Mecca, and make those dua that you need to express yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, express yourself to the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj al-sharif. The second, how we deal with it, is the professional and the clinical way. As we stated, they are the experts in their field. And therefore we cannot neglect the amount of experience that these professionals have in supporting you through whatever mental health challenges that a person may be going through. We are required to go through professionals. If, God forbid, you had cancer, where would you go? To the cancer specialist. If you have diabetes problem, where would you go? To the diabetes or endocrinology specialist. If you have a mental health problem, where do you go? To a psychiatrist, to a mental health expert. Now, I have to emphasize that because, as I stated, sometimes we stigmatize and we think that people don't or shouldn't go there. We think the moment I go to my doctor, the moment I go to a clinician, the moment I go to a counselor, they're going to put me in a white coat and put me off into a padded room. Not at all. It doesn't work like this. The expert in the field, like any other expert in the field, will ask you simple questions, diagnose what you may be going through, the root causes, what happens in your family history, if there are other surrounding circumstances, and treat you accordingly. The same way you would be treated for any other health issue, you would be treated the same for a mental health issue. Therefore, it may be that they have to offer some sort of medicine. It may be that they offer their experience in how to respond to one of these challenges. But it doesn't mean that we turn away from the experts in the field. Rather, they, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are the immediate second recourse, because they are the experts within the field. Now, it may be outside of a doctor, you have different places in which you can go to. There are websites where you can go to for assistance. For example, mind.org.uk. There are Muslim youth helplines. There are Samaritan helplines where you can call and speak to someone who is professionally trained to be able to give you a response. Even if you can't go to one of these places, at the very least, if you have any mental health issues, talk to a family member. Talk to a friend. Express yourself what you're going through. Get a person to be able to listen to what you're going through, rather than having to deal with it yourself. And I'll tell you why, brothers and sisters. Because in our community we have had this stigma, oh, just let him work through it himself. He'll get over it. It's not a problem. Because we've had this kind of mentality, you know what's happened? They've not got over it. It's stayed with them for years, generations. What we end up saying is, don't worry, he'll get over his problems. Don't worry, he's addicted to this. Let's just get him married off and then he'll overcome the addiction. You know what you do? You place that burden onto someone else. Why are there so many divorces? Why are there so many fights within the community, within spouses? We say, he'll get over it, it's okay, let him deal with it. Just send him to Karbala, send him on ziyarah and he'll come back fixed. It doesn't work like that. Especially if it's going to be a chemical reaction within the brain. Therefore, it needs to be diagnosed, it needs to be treated, and then we can help that person be married. Then we can help them move on with their lives. We have to understand these things exist, and as we reiterated, so many of our youth, so many of our elders statistically are going through these challenges. Therefore, we cannot bury this any longer. We are responsible as human beings, responsible to each other, and responsible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for how we respond to these various challenges in our community. Therefore, what have we stated in conclusion? Number one, we all have mental health, just like we have health of any other part of our body. Number two, a lot of these issues, when we undertake these problems in our life, sometimes we respond to it in our environmental responses. Sometimes it's based upon your chemical reaction from your brain, which you cannot deal with. Therefore, we have to identify whether we have these problems, and then fourthly, we have to treat them appropriately. Inshallah, this discussion has been of help and has started us being able to talk openly about these challenges within our families, within our communities. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin.